Welcome to our webinar on real-time analytics. Just about a minute or two till showtime. We're just gonna give it a little bit here for people to click in and get settled. All right, it's noon on the East Coast of the US here, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Today's webinar, Some Like It Hot, of course, talking about data, is a webinar co-sponsored by Tallan and Imply. The rough agenda, we're going to do some brief introductions here in a minute. Definitely want to make a strong business case for real time, because I think there's still a lot of organizations that are running on more traditional data infrastructures, and even in my own career, as I've seen conversations around planning for data, and business ask the question of can we have this, and when can we have this, and can it be real time? Over the years, there was a lot of pushback for a lot of reasons, and cost and the time to implement being one of them. But we're in the 2020s now. The future's here, and it's certainly a lot easier to pull off real time. And so we're going to talk through what real time can do for your business. And I think make a strong argument that it really is important to anyone in any industry, not just some of those modern leading brands. And then the rest will be a demo from our partners at Imply, who have the market leading analytics solution when it comes to real-time analytics. And we're going to get behind the scenes tour of the analytics platform from Imply, based on Apache Druid. And then at the end, we'll wrap up. So in terms of introductions, my name is Adam Warbeck. I'm a managing director at Tallan. I've been with the company since 2003, so quite a while, and have focused a lot on the data side of things, and so I've seen data infrastructures and architectures evolve over the years, and are pretty excited about what we've got available to us these days. Co-presenting with me today from Imply is their global head of partner engineering, Ramel Garcia, and then one of our practice managers at Tallan, Ryan Clark, will wrap the show up at the end. All right, the case for real time. So when I was growing up, it was the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and when we thought about the future, and I guess maybe some of it was influenced by movies like Back to the Future 2. The future had all these cool toys, right? Self-tying sneakers, hoverboards, and I think in that movie they were zooming ahead to 2015. So a few years ago, but certainly we've got there are self-tying sneakers. Actually, Nike makes a pair if you'd like to check them out. The hoverboards, the ones that I've seen, didn't fly. They rolled around, and I think I think a lot of them caught on fire, if I remember correctly. So maybe a little work in progress there. But in terms of other cool toys that we've got, think about all those subscription services that we're members of, whether it's it's on our mobile devices and in gaming contexts or on our TVs, through the various streaming services that we're subscribed to. And what they have in common is a lot of information available to us at our fingertips. And if you can imagine being technical folks listening into this webinar, we want to know what's going on behind the scenes. If you can imagine what's behind the scenes, is some pretty impressive infrastructures to power not just the user experiences, but also how you run those businesses, right? If you're going to serve hundreds of millions of users and those users expect a real-time experience, well, then you've got two big and very lofty goals. You've got to basically provide for real time, and you've got to do it at scale. And so what's happened in technology as a result of the needs of these huge organizations that we interact with every day is that sort of safari of open source projects on the Apache Foundation, right? That's come up to support that real-time and scalable infrastructure, and it's evolved, over the last decade or two, and it's gotten even more rapid. But what about the rest of industry, right? We know why, and these businesses like the Netflixes and the Twitches and all the digital sort of businesses that have come out in the last 10 or 20 years, they had the benefit of being born when technology what it is today. But what about the more traditional industries like banking? What about medicine? What about retail, and getting all those products that we love to have, whenever we want them, whenever we need them, in whatever color, flavor, shape, and size that we need them? And what about that supply chain that of interconnected companies, that work together to get us those products? And even, probably one of the more or oldest industries out there, right? Shipping things around on the seas. I mean, that's how arguably, America was discovered. And so these old industries that are shipping around those goods, what about those industries? Well, it was about, I think, 3 years ago or so where The Economist had a cover story about how data has now become the world's most important resource. And I think 10 years before that, there was a economist in the UK that said that data was the new oil. And so if data is the new oil, what are our organizations? Why shouldn't every business be challenged to leverage it? And why, if data is such an important asset, wouldn't you want it to be as real time as possible? Why aren't the goals of those big companies that are, digitally native, why shouldn't that be everyone's goal? Everybody, these days is going through some sort of a transformation so that they don't get Netflixed, right? Like Blockbuster did. And as you're part of that transformation, eventually, if it hasn't happened yet, eventually somebody's going to make the case that you need real time. There's a reason why when you interact with Netflix, you rarely see a screen like this. And if you do, it's probably more because your internet went down than some issue at Netflix itself. And the reason for that is behind the scenes at Netflix, they're running a very sophisticated infrastructure in real time to monitor what's going on. So they can be aware of issues. If they push out a feature, they can be aware if that's causing problems. If they get a spike in demand, they can be aware. So they can fix these issues before they happen. And that's sort of a more proactive way of doing business. And that's going to basically make my first case of why any company, any industry needs real time. It's risk management. And nobody needs a dashboard to know that things are going well. If business is going swimmingly fine, I can check in once a week and see, yeah, everything looks great, everything's green. But it's preventing issues and risks to my business that make a great case for real time. So going back to the banking scenario, how do we stop the bad actors out there from interacting and laundering money and committing financial crimes? When our doctors run out of personal protective equipment because of, say, a pandemic, how do we get on top of that and enable the and know where the masks are if that's what's needed? If a truck breaks down in that supply chain, how do we resolve that issue before it becomes a bigger problem before it results in shelves being emptied, perhaps either because of a spike in demand or because of a logistical problem. And so these kinds of issues that make a great case for needing to go to real time and being aware of things so that you can proactively make decisions. And the bigger case, the more broad one, is that digital transformation story. Every one of those businesses, every one of those industries is being digitized in some way, shape, or form, some better than others. But as they go digital, inevitably there's going to be more data, more users, more complexity, and you need that sort of infrastructure that's come from the innovation done by those digital brands that we mentioned at the beginning. So hopefully you're convinced. Now, how do we do this? So to tee that up, I'd like to go back in time and talk a little bit, just real quick, about how data is moved around in organizations, right? So I mentioned in my 17-year career or so, I've seen a lot of different types of data. So when we started, we were loading data warehouses with a process that I think most of you are familiar with. It's ETL. You extract data out of one set of systems, you transform it into a schema, and map it into and load it into a centralized data warehouse. That worked okay. It's still got its places and usefulness. It scales pretty well. It can take giant batches of data and load them in, but it's not real time. So on the other end of the spectrum, we tried to do some real-time integration, and this became known as enterprise application integration, where we could essentially connect systems together and make them communicate with each other in near real time, but it didn't scale. It couldn't move the volumes of data that arguably we need to move today. And so that's what you have. Basically, you had to trade either real time, but no scale in the form of EAI, or you could do ETL, and while it scaled, it wasn't real time. So what's the answer? The answer is now we have available to us some pretty amazing streaming technology. And while streaming, where it started, was a need to solve real time and streams of data, there's an argument, as we can see on this chart, that it can cover both. So just if you think about it for a second, if you can do streaming, if I can move bits and bits of data around in real time when they need to, I could use that same technology to batch things up and process, chunks of data in sequence. And so one can solve the other, and so why not go for the biggest bang for the buck and take advantage of what's available to you today? And with that, and setting the stage for real time, I want to turn it over to my co-presenter. So if you think about the infrastructure that's running, if you do some research and look at the infrastructure that's running behind the Netflixes and the Twitches of the world, you'll see that they're running a product called Apache Druid. And we have with us on the webinar today the makers of Apache Druid, the folks from Imply. So I'm going to throw it over to Ramel and have him take us through some of their exciting technology.
Thank you, Adam. And let me know if you can see my screen, just making sure because we're switching here. Are you able to see my slide?
Looks like it came up for me, yep.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adam, for setting the stage for me here. And we're gonna show you our product in terms of supporting streaming analytics. And the scope of the demo here that I'm gonna show you in a second is pretty much streaming retail transactions. And Imply Pivot, which is our proprietary visualization tool purpose-built for Druid, will be used for the demo. And then Imply as the backend, which is powered by Druid, that stores all of the data and process or execute all the queries sub-second. And then differentiating prescribed and investigative reporting, because the world of yesterday is heavily relying on prescribed reporting. In this new age where a lot of the data are now being streamed, investigative reporting is becoming the norm. This is the high-level architecture. The data that we're streaming from is coming from a open source product called Kafka. And all of the transactions for these purchases of products from retail stores are flowing in. And then Imply then ingest the data from Kafka. And then Imply Pivot sits on top of that for querying purposes. So I'm going to switch my screen here and show you real quick our Pivot tool. So what you're seeing currently is a view of a SQL page for Imply pivot. And the data that I'm going to be querying is the store sales calculated. So think of it as your table as well. And it's very synonymous to how the structure of the data is actually laid out. But the reason why I pulled this up is to show you that we're getting data. So the last 3 digits is 522, and then it's changing. So we're constantly ingesting data, constantly, it doesn't stop. And here is a dashboard for that particular data source called demand and profit. So this view is, very similar to the other tools there, like Tableau, MicroStrategy, and so on. And it's a way for you to quickly understand how well your business is operating. And where we differ from prescribed reporting is that what you see on the screen is pretty much static. That's how prescribed reporting is pretty much set up. With investigative type reporting, if you see some patterns or some numbers that you think are questionable in the dashboard, you can quickly go through it. And let me click this, for instance, a profit by region. I see that there's only one region who's doing well and the rest are not performing as expected. And so I can go in here, and now it takes me to my cube page. Now this is where the majority of the work is going to be done. Now on the left side, right here, as an analyst, I'm only seeing one set of dimensions particular to the table, right? So everything is simple. And then you have the middle section here where you can slice and dice, drag and drop the dimensions and understand patterns. And then you have your measures. So for the bubble size, my measure was sales, and then for the y-axis it was profit. Now, the beauty of this is it's simple, right? And a lot of the requirements coming from the analyst wants to have full control of their data, which means they want to do self-service type analytics. With a very legacy system, especially in the data warehouse space, you have to depend on data engineers to prepare your data before it can be analyzed. Which might take a week or more, and that kind of dependency is hindering the analysts to do their job better in finding patterns faster that might affect the business bottom line. And so what you see here to the left are all of the dimensions that are available, and these are all governed for an approved analyst to do their work. And this page is where they can spend time finding out reasons why this number is big and why this number is small. So let me go here and just drag a couple more dimensions to show you, how you can find out, what's affecting the sales for the central region and the other regions, because the data that we have here is actually global. So I'm going to go ahead and change my view into table just so I can see what regions I have. And I know the central region is really, really doing well, but Canada isn't. So if I want to understand, okay, why is the central region doing really well? So I can go here and then just select that and then add in here the country, and then I'm going to add in here the city and store ID. Now I have visibility into which stores are performing well. And if I have to choose, let's say, these stores, filter them down, and then find out, what products are selling really well for that day for them. And I can go ahead and drag the product ID in here. And so now I have a list of product per store, because sometimes with store, whatever they sell there is specific to the location where they're at. And so the different products that you see here that are really selling well, then this can be printed out by going in here. You can download it as CSV and then share it with your inventory team or your merchant team who's responsible for negotiating price with the manufacturers and say, hey, we see that these different products are really selling well in the store and would like to negotiate the price so that we can sell it more. And so now they have leverage to actually talk to the vendors and start making negotiations that would benefit them more, and then help the consumers actually pay less, because if there's more demand, then obviously they can be flexible in the price as well. So within a few minutes, I was able to figure out, what products are selling well for a particular store, and then communicate that back into the merchants that's responsible for managing the relationship with the vendors to make the negotiations happen there. So really, the gist of this is making decisions faster, right? You got to have a simple way to make decisions faster, and this is pretty much the tool that would support you on that. Now, another thing that's very powerful here is that the measures that you see, you can also create your own measure. And the reason why I say that is because some formulas don't stay the same forever, right? Business changes, and so formulas changes as well on how you calculate certain things. And you can actually create your own measure in here, and then based on existing data, you are able to either just do a basic calculation or a custom-based calculation. And you don't have to go back to your data engineer to make that for you, which also takes a week or more. We heard from another partner that he was talking to a CTO, and the CTO was asked a question of how much does it cost to change one dimension or one measure. And he said it takes about $1 million, and it's going to take about 3 weeks. So that kind of friction is hindering business analysts or executives to make decisions faster, and it's costly as well. And so we avoid that by providing the ability for the analysts to build their own measures in here directly. So that's our demo, and I'm going to go into our slide here and talk about what are the different things that makes the Imply analytics platform really unique. And so Imply really saw the future, right? Because its goal was to empower analysts to do more advanced things in simple way. Your legacy systems of yesterday only allows you to query your data in a all-up fashion, right? But a lot of requirements coming up, users wants to do also searches on the same data set and apply some time functions on top of that as well. So this convergence of OLAP and time series functions and search functions is now becoming the norm. And in order for it to be adopted easily, you got to have a really easy tool to use, but at the same time, give the analysts the power to do what they want. And so Gartner actually also saw this kind of trend where we now have what they call a citizen data scientist, right? And the citizen data scientist is what I'm describing about. And they are responsible for finding patterns and helping business executives make decisions that's going to have a high impact into their bottom line. So the traditional BI stack, doesn't solve every possible use case now, and a lot of the tools and applications that are built today are driven by digital transformation and becoming a data-driven organization as well. So let's talk about the value of data then. So streaming data equates to hot data. And so where does hot data come from and why it's so important? as we heard earlier from Adam, he starts talking about supply chain, right? So even 18-wheeler trucks these days have sensor built into it because they have a refrigeration system. And so they want to make sure that the products inside it are protected. And that data generated by the sensor is actually exposed to the driver and to distribution centers and operational centers as well. And so they have immediate visibility when the system starts, not performing as expected. Because if, say, for instance, the temperature goes off within the set parameter, then all of that item will, be garbage. It turns to garbage, especially if it's meat, even vegetables, right? Also, financial space, right? You have your typical stocks, and also a lot of the events happening for anti-money laundering. You want to detect them right away to minimize impact for compliance penalty. And then you also have the smart home intelligence. A lot of this different, technology that we heard of and use on a regular basis are generating hot data. Hot data pretty much constitute the majority of the bottom line for businesses. This hot data, once they get generated, they age, right? So it starts with milliseconds, and then depending on your vertical, if you are in the retail space and you do product pricing optimization, you do that once a week. But the trend we're seeing is they're going to do that once a day as well. So now it's becoming milliseconds to a day. And then on the historical side of things, as data ages, then it becomes more cold, and that data will be processed very rarely. And I'm going to give you an example with Netflix, which is one of the examples Adam brought earlier to his presentation, where Netflix actually put up a contest where they have this historical data and ask globally people to come in and find out, like, a way to calculate or predict, make predictions on how they can get 1% more of their total revenue by doing machine learning work. And so that 1% is pretty much coming from the historical data. So they can squeeze more juice out of what data they have here, but the majority of their business actually comes from the hot data. So it's really, really valuable for them. Now, with the traditional BI stack, it's really great for cold analytics, and it's a non-interactive query. It takes high seconds to minutes, and you have your typical canned, reporting and dashboarding, and the way how people access it. The volume of the query is pretty much low to medium, and then there's really little concurrency, behind these products. And it's mainly batch ingest, your typical data warehouses of today, right? You have tools like ETL tools that would prepare the data for it in a batch fashion. And then you have your BI layers and data warehouses as well. So these are your typical, BI stack. Now for hot data analytics stack, it's a little bit different, right? Because now you only have one platform for storing all of the data and computing the data, which is Imply Druid, and then Imply Pivot as your visualization tool. And what gives you is essentially really good experiences. And as you saw earlier, when I was drag and dropping, it was quick, it was snappy, right? Which is what analysts wants to use. Your query are sub-seconds, and you can build a application-driven use case on top of Imply. And then you can query by the thousands, per second. And then you can have as many users, even by the thousands, hammering on this platform at the same time. And it supports both streaming and batch ingest as well. So really, this is a very simple platform that gives a lot of value to our customers. And here's how it's looking like. So the integration points from many different data sources. We can integrate with data lakes to get data out of that and be made available in Imply for really quick analysis of the data. message buses like Kafka and Kinesis. We also integrate with those. And then data from data warehouses of yesterday, we can import the data from there too. And the tool responsible within the stack of our platform are what we call the Imply connectors. Druid is our core, and that's our kernel, if you will, that powers the performance of our platform. And then Pivot, as you saw earlier, is our visualization tool, and it provides you the ability to be alerted given certain conditions that you build for your alerting. And then Imply Manager as your tool to manage your cluster, either on-prem or actually on cloud as well. And obviously, security is very important. And then Clarity is the tool that gives you visibility into how well your platform is actually performing from a query perspective and ingest perspective. All right, so I'm gonna pass it now to Ryan here from Tallan to cover the next steps and recaps.
Awesome, thanks Ramel, and thanks Adam for getting. Ramel, are you still able to share, or I could bring it back up?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, looks like my battery is about to die. But
hey, no problem. I'll share again if that helps us out.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so I just wanted to do kind of a recap of what we talked about today, and then some potential good next steps in getting started with Imply and Tallan. So, I mean, Adam and Ramel, they did a great job of kind of walking through really what is the value of real-time analytics, and how is how companies are using data changing, and that need for real-time. So, stepping away from today's webinar, we really want you to think about, where does real-time analytics and how is it applicable to your business? So, whether you're on the manufacturing side, supply chain, or in media and entertainment, whatever industry it may be, there's usually some pretty good use cases for real-time. And as Adam mentioned early on in the webinar, the world is changing, and the way that we need to react to our customer base is changing, and we need to be very reactive and almost in real time there. And then the final thing was also, when we're thinking of our data architectures, what technologies do we want to bring into play? So for real time, adding something like an Imply to your data architecture to really hone in your real-time analytics capabilities is something that's important, and something that we could certainly help evaluate as well. Adam, if you want to go to the next slide. And then in terms of next steps, I wanted to throw a couple things out there. So Imply actually has a great offer right now for their free tier of their Imply Cloud. So I definitely encourage you to go and test that out and use it, and also get connected with Ramel and others at Imply. And then on the Tallan side, like I said, we've been, we're consultants, so we've been working with a lot of our customers to evaluate their overall data strategy, and really how that architecture how that architecture comes together, and really making sure that we understand the technologies that you're using now, and that you're picking the right technologies for the future to enable you to become real time, or support the needs of your customers with the data that you're getting. So we've been working with a handful of customers doing these sort of data strategy assessments, understanding where they are today, where they want to be in the future, and where something like an Imply could fit into their strategy. So overall, for next steps, it would be great to connect with some of you that were able to join today. We'll also, this was recorded, so we'll be able to send out this recording of the webinar if you want to share it with colleagues as well. And then I definitely would love to connect with you that did attend, and hear your feedback on the event, discuss some of your needs around your current technology stack, and also hear kind of what your thoughts would be about real time for your business, and how we could start to bake out some of those ideas. And overall, I mean, if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to us via email, and we could definitely get something set up to discuss more. So with that, I'll open it up to the Q&A.
So Ryan, I'm looking in the chat here, and I don't think anybody's posted any questions.
All right. Well, with that, I think we can put this to a close. But thanks again for everyone that was able to hop on. And again, we'll be following up, with the recording and for some of these next steps as well.
Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Have a great day.